Hi, welcome to Common Core Common Sense, and today we're here with Estelle Halbert, and she is going to help us in learning a little bit more about the resources available to parents of students in any aspect of special education. And welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so quickly, let's just dive in.
Okay.
My child came home with paperwork about an IEP. What does that mean, and what should I do?
Well, the acronym IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. And if your child is being considered for special education or exceptional student education, which is called in Florida, ESE, then you are going to get your rights, which is called due process. And you will be invited to a meeting that is held at the school, and it's called an IEP meeting, which is the plan to promote your students' education, and all the caregivers that are going to be involved will be the students' teachers, the administration, your student, of course, the parent, and anybody else who has any contact with your student and their educational needs.
And that's at any grade level?
Yes, any grade level,
Okay.
even preschool, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that. Where do I find, and by I mean a parent, find good information about laws impacting the special needs of my child?
Well, we started with the American Disabilities Act, and through the American with Disabilities Act came IDEA, the Individual Disabilities Education Act. And through that, you can go to a website. In Florida, we have Florida Department of Education, FLDOE.org, and they have an abundant amount of information that you can get pertaining to the laws, what the spectrum from gifted to students with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, and mental disabilities.
Because it's important to understand that it's neither a blessing nor a curse.
Absolutely.
To have this designation. We want to avoid the word label because, again, with a negative connotation, but it is what it is.
Absolutely.
It's giving you more information about how to help your child.
And we're trying to get away from the labeling of students. It's not a student with it's not necessarily a student with a disability. It's a student with a need, and therefore we would just want to address those needs that the student can be successful in education.
So, again, as a parent, I know my child's, or I should know my child's strengths and weaknesses. How can I communicate those to my children's teachers without really being a pest?
Well, during an IEP meeting, all the caregivers are involved. This would be a good time at the beginning of the school year. You will have an IEP meeting to review your students' classes and what the students' accommodations and or modifications are going to be within the classroom. This would be a good time for you to explain your students' needs, for your student to explain their own needs and how they learn best. And that is a good time for you to review any accommodations or modifications that need to take place in the classroom or during testing.
Okay. How can I actually help teachers help my child? I mean, obviously communication of what my child needs or doesn't need is a good start. Can I take that one step beyond? And I think it's because I'm thinking, like, when I was really little, we had room mothers in elementary school. And,
Right.
we teach high school, so I know that's gone away, but we still accept volunteers.
Right.
Can parents do anything a little bit more hands-on or a little bit more directly to help teachers help their child?
Well, there's always room for volunteers in the school system, so that's just really something that needs to be taken up with the school. However, with the student with a disability or a gifted student, all have an IEP, and the gifted students have something a little bit different. However, they all have that IEP, and it is a present level of performance. It gives all the information about the student, what the student's disability or abilities are. It gives the goals for the students for their educational progress. It gives a lot of information that each teacher should be aware of. And that is always housed at the school. So the teachers, all the students' teachers have access to that IEP.
Okay. All right, so here's a fancy word that seems to be used a great deal in special education. Accommodations. What are they? Will my child always have them? Are they only available during public schooling?
Accommodations are given to students with disabilities and gifted students to help in the way that the child learns. You'll hear the difference between accommodation and modification. Accommodations are just an assistance to give the students to help them learn better because they learn in a different way. Modifications means that you are going to change the curriculum, or you are going to change what the student actually learns. So usually students that are on a standard diploma, they're going to have the same curriculum as all other students. However, the way that they are delivered the information, the way that they give the information back, the way that they test may be accommodated just a little bit.
Okay. All right, so at these IEP meetings, teachers are tossing around terms and things I don't understand. And I know that a lot of parents might just kind of feel slightly overwhelmed at this. So is the Florida Department of Education a good website to go if I've got more questions about these terms?
Absolutely.
Or, where else can I go to just kind of educate myself so that I know what they're talking about?
I really did investigate the Florida Department of Education's website, and it's fldoe.org. And they actually have, if you go to the ESE side, that has a glossary of all the acronyms and all the terms that you would be familiar with. However, if you're ever sitting in a IEP meeting, and teachers do tend to throw acronyms around IEPs, and once a parent hears all these acronyms, they sometimes feel a little disheartened that they don't know what all those mean. But please, by all means, we expect all parents just to say, what does that mean?
Where can I find activities that I can do at home with my child to help them, improve their weaknesses or use their strengths to get them to be more independent?
Right.
Is the meeting a good place for that, or what suggestions do you have?
I think that it really depends on the subject, and it depends on the specific learning disability or this specific disability, because some students who are in ESE don't have a mental disability. It's just a physical disability, and so they need those accommodations or modifications. So it would be my suggestion that you get with the teachers and see what's working in the classroom, what's not working in the classroom. And again, this is a good time for the parent to say, this is what we would do at home, and what do you suggest? So keeping the communication open between parents and teachers is a wonderful asset to the teachers, to the students' learning.
I like that because we're in high school, I can ask the students directly too. Because if I get information from you, the student's visually impaired, they need this particular kind of thing. Well, then I figured out, high contrast works.
Right.
And I can go directly to that student. Does this work for you? Can I do this for you instead? And then I ended up with something that worked well for him, but I didn't have to single him out anymore.
Right.
And that's a blessing. So I personally, as a teacher, would say to you parents, teach your children to speak up for themselves. So self-advocate is our phrase.
Exactly.
And it's a great phrase. It means a great deal. But the more that students can do that on their own, the easier it's going to be for them and the teachers. I mean, it's so much easier for me to give that child what they need when they need it, when they're asking me directly, as opposed to looking it up on this information.
Absolutely.
And it's just key. Okay, moving on. But let's pretend my family needs to move. Will there be large changes in what kind of support my student could receive? Does that change between counties or states? What questions should I ask?
When a student moves, a student that has already been declared or determined to be eligible for ESE students, it does change from school to school sometimes, from city to city, state to state, in the delivery model that they have. In Florida, we presently have several delivery models. If a student is on standard diploma, they may receive services in a resource self-contained setting, which is a smaller class. Mm-hmm. They may receive services in the general education setting with a co-teacher or a support facilitation teacher that comes into the classroom. Or they may receive services in the consultation model, which they're in the general education classroom, and the consultation teacher just meets with the student and meets with the teacher to give the teacher ideas, just like you said, and techniques and mm-hmm. ways to help the student.
I'm glad you mentioned the word techniques, because the other thing to touch on is that everyone learns differently.
Absolutely.
And parents that are keyed into their students really figure this out. the other side of that coin is we're learners too.
Right.
And so we as people just kind of gravitate towards teaching in a particular way. So again, that self-advocating and mentioning techniques and things that are effective will be a really good way for the teacher to, stay on top of his or her game and maybe teach outside their own comfort zone.
Exactly. And I must say that Jan is a wonderful example of this because we work together with some of the ESE students, and she actually works outside of the box on a lot of students. And I had a couple of students who were dyslexic and was having a problem with their spelling and what have you. And she found on her own some techniques that work with those students, writing in sand, and it was just a blessing to the school that you brought that to us.
Master's degree.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. All right, how can I as a parent use the support at school to help my student strengthen himself, to make them more, let me say this again more clearly. I know that my student's getting what they need at school. How can I as a parent kind of tag into that and use that to support to let my student become more independent? I want to back out of this picture a bit.
Right.
How do I make that happen?
Well, that's kind of like just what you do at school, you want to bring it home and do it for homework, and vice versa. What they do at home, you want to let them take that to school and self-advocate and say, my mom tried to do this with me and it seems to work, so maybe we could try this at school. So keeping the door open with communication between the parents and the teachers and the student will help you wean that student away from some of their accommodations.
Okay. When is it appropriate for me to allow my student more or perhaps even all control over their educational decisions? I mean, we keep coming back to this self-advocacy thing because the whole idea is to raise any child to be independent outside of,
Right.
high school and be able to take care of themselves and hopefully a family and stuff like that. How do I know? Because you can't make a blanket statement at age 7.5, this is
Correct.
good. How do I know? What do I look for so that I can, again, start weaning my child away from, mommy has to do this, mommy told me this?
Well, during the IEP process, the Individualized Education Plan is under an annual review. So every year, we look at the goals, we look at the accommodations, any modifications that the student is given, and we look at the input given by the teacher, and then we determine which accommodations that we can add and which accommodations that we can delete because the student is learning away from those. So on a yearly process through the IEP, then you have that opportunity to determine what is good and what is not, and what is working and what is not. Additionally, upon the child's 17th birthday, there is a process that you have to go through that says that when the child turns 18, then they are actually in charge of their own IEP.
Oh.
The parent is always invited. The parent is always can be a part of the child's IEP, but under law, when they turn 18, then they have that right to speak up for themselves and sign on their own dotted line and make those educational choices for themselves.
Good. All right, finally, anything that you would like parents to know that we haven't covered?
Well, because that there is a change between state to state in the educational process and the delivery models, any child that has been determined eligible for ESE services is allowed to have those services or is guaranteed those services in any state in the United States, of course. The only thing is when you withdraw your child from one school to another school, please, when you enroll your child, please bring a copy of your IEP or let the school know that that student does receive ESE services so that they can align the services that they are getting in one school with the services that they had in the previous school.
All right, that covers it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much
Appreciate
for
it.
having me.